Good evening. As I just mentioned, my name is Carol Lisk, and I'm welcoming you to the Psi Upsilon chapter program on how to write an abstract for a poster presentation and how to develop a poster. Next slide. I have the privilege of serving as the chapter president for the new WGU Psi Upsilon chapter. I am a manager of course faculty in the graduate nursing program and am delighted that you're here with us this evening. Next slide. Just a little information about our Psi Upsilon chapter. We've had a lot of growth both at the university and in the chapter. Our Psi Upsilon chapter was chartered on July 12, 2017, when we were attending our Salt Lake City academic meetings. We are the 546th chapter to be chartered by what was Sigma Theta Tau International and is now known as Sigma. Next slide. Since we were chartered, we've accomplished a great deal. We've established a strong board of directors, including 5 officers and 12 committee chair. We've approved our biennial strategic plan, and we currently have over 500 members in 40 states throughout the United States. Well, there are many benefits to membership in Sigma, not the least of which is professional programming like tonight, both at the Sigma level as well as at the chapter level, that supports professional development and scholarship and leadership. We also have some upcoming programs with world-renowned nursing leaders, and all of our programs are recorded for asynchronous viewing. We also will be providing some funding for research, scholarships, and travel grants, and promoting service opportunities throughout the United States. So as you might imagine, WGU, with our size and scope, is offering our chapter some great opportunities to support nursing throughout the United States. Next slide. So what brings you here tonight is this excellent program that we've put together for you. I would like to introduce our 2 presenters. Both are esteemed faculty members at Western Governors University, Dr. Debbie Judge and Dr. Becky Feather. Dr. Debbie Judge, I'd like to introduce you and say about yourself and your background.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Judge, and I have been a nurse for over 20 years. I started out as an EMT and went back to school to become a licensed practical nurse, returned to school to get my associate degree, again to get my bachelor's degree. Then I went back and got my master's degree, and I finally ended up and got my doctoral degree. So I'm a true lifelong learner. I've been in nursing education for over 12 years, and I've been a member of Sigma Theta Tau since 2004. So I'm real excited to be here tonight and to share this information with everyone. So I just want to thank everybody for attending the presentation. Becky and I both appreciate being able to share the evening with you tonight. Our presentation is going to be focused on sharing our knowledge and experience to those of you who may be new to developing abstracts and posters, and hopefully to help you get started disseminating your work. For those of you who may have some experience, we're hopeful that some of our tips that we'll share will be useful in your future submissions.
Absolutely, thank you. And Dr. Becky Feather will introduce herself when we move into her program. So thank you. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Debbie Judge.
Thank you. So our presentation we have 2 parts of our presentation tonight. And the first presentation part is our objectives are going to be that our participants will gain an understanding of the purpose and how to write an abstract, as well as the process of submitting for presentations. So what is the purpose of an abstract? The abstract is what you will submit for the conference reviewers, and this determines if you're going to be accepted as a presenter. It's important that in your abstract you share your passion for your project or your study in a very concise format that gives the reviewer a glimpse of what you will have to offer when you complete the presentation. So your abstract should be a concise description of a topic or a concept, and it must align with the conference theme. The abstract is what you will use to guide your presentation, depending on whether it's a poster or a podium presentation. Not only will you align the abstract and the title with the conference theme, but you'll also need to use the conference criteria for that particular conference. This will include information on the word count for your abstract, and different conferences have different uh, uh, abstracts numbers for that. So some of them may be as small as 50 word count, and others may be as high as 500. So you have to be careful that you look at that criteria. Examples that you may see for headings will be an introduction and background, a method section, results, conclusions. And depending on the conference, there may be different options that have specific requirements for particular topics such as education, research, community, or clinical, just to name a few. As nurses, most of us are doers. We want to get things done, but we don't always reflect on the ways to share our knowledge and experiences that may benefit others. So, disseminating your work provides new information. It helps keep nurses up to date, share our initiatives, communicate findings of research studies, and develop the science base of the nursing profession. So, presenting at a conference is an excellent opportunity to just do that. For starters, it's so easy to submit an abstract for a poster presentation, and Becky's going to talk to us more about that in the second part of our presentation tonight as she shares how to develop a poster. There are two types of abstracts. The first is research-based and will include the purpose, the conceptual framework, the method, the data analysis, results, conclusion, and implications for nursing practice. Examples of this could be the work that you completed in your dissertation or any studies that you have completed that would be valuable knowledge to share. Small studies are fine also, and sometimes doing a small pilot study may produce positive outcomes that are also impactful and could be shared with others who could be contemplating similar studies, or they may be inspired by what you've done and they can go back to their institutions and encourage change there. A program-based abstract will include a description of the project, an outline of the objectives, outcomes, the value to nursing practice, and suggestions for implementation. Examples of this might include a new course or a new program that reveals new knowledge or outcomes. And remember that the results, they don't always have to be positive or what you're hoping for. I can give you an example of this. When I did my DNP project, it was regarding spirituality and chronic disease self-management. And I held community courses for several years teaching chronic disease self-management. So I wanted to know if adding a spiritual component would make a difference. And I was convinced that it would. So I decided to offer classes at my church, which happens to be the largest church in my small community. And nothing that I expected would happen happened. Nothing went like I thought it would. People within my church, they invited other people to the classes. And even though one of those classes was the largest class I ever held, it was also the rowdiest class as well. So my results didn't turn out exactly what I expected. But I was able to submit the abstracts, and I was able to present my study at two different conferences from that study. So again, the type of abstract will be guided by your research or your project and the criteria of the conference wherever you're submitting. So how to get started. Um, you want to find a conference that you're interested in attending or presenting at, and review the criteria to be sure that your project aligns with the conference theme. Most conferences change their themes every year and they have a different focus. So you want to be sure to follow the guidelines and including the designated word count. The title is also very important. If it aligns with the conference, it is best if it aligns with the conference title or the objectives. What to include. This can vary from conference to conference, so you really want to be sure and pay close attention to the guidelines. As I mentioned, the title is very important. You don't want to make it too long. You don't want it to be boring. You want it to be something catchy that's going to catch their attention. You want to include all of the authors' names and their credentials. And credentials should always be listed starting with the highest degree earned, not a certification or registered nurse. It should start with the highest degree earned. You'll also need to include the institution where your project or your research was completed. And you may want to add a logo. So if you're an NLN accredited site, or you're associated with Sigma Theta Tau, or possibly if you have you do something in simulation and your simulation lab is accredited, whatever, you might need to acknowledge that. So you might need to include a logo. You'd also want to include any funding received for the research or the project. This doesn't mean funding to attend the conference, but rather funding that's associated with the actual grant, which would be, or with the project, which would be like a grant. So the next few slides, I'm going to share with you some information about an upcoming conference that my peers and I will be presenting a poster presentation. And I'm going to walk you through the steps that we followed in developing our abstract. So the Nursing Education Research Conference was where we chose to submit an abstract for presentation. And we actually submitted for an oral presentation, but unfortunately we were not chosen for that, but we were chosen to do a poster presentation, which we accepted. The theme of the conference is generating and translating evidence for teaching practice. And the conference outcomes are listed as 1, to translate research outcomes into educational practice and policy, and 2, share research findings that impact learner preparation. So it's very important that we aligned our title and our project along these guidelines. So our study happened to align very well with the conference and the theme, and we chose our title as Teaching Q Methodology to Baccalaureate Nursing Students. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this as we go along. I don't have slides. I'm going to be reading some of this, and I apologize for that. But since the information hasn't been actually presented yet, I didn't want to put it up on a slide. So, so the first part of our abstract is the background. This is the section. It's going to include the significance of the problem, why are you doing the project, why is it needed, and what gaps were noted that led a desire to do the project. The next section is the purpose and the objectives, and this will include the major goals, the objectives, or the aim of your project, and it's important here to have a strong problem statement. Oftentimes, the background and the purpose and objectives will be together, formed together in your abstract. And in this case, mine is. So I'm going to read you my background. There's a growing professional emphasis on providing patient-centered care, but teaching patient-centered research methods in nursing curricula is far from routine. Q methodology is a philosophical framework and set of techniques used to systematically study subjective attitudes, beliefs, and opinions in a way that minimizes researcher bias. Participants actively make their preferences known through a sorting process. Then, by-person factor analysis is used to find groups with shared viewpoints. Q methodology can be used for research, quality improvement, and program evaluation, but few nurses have a basic understanding of this mixed method design. The purpose of this project is to describe the implementation and evaluation of a one-day class in a baccalaureate nursing research course created to increase students' awareness of Q methodology. Now, before I go any farther, I will tell you this was a very lengthy abstract. I think this was like 500 words, which is, they're usually not near this long. So the next section is going to be your methods section, and this is where you'll include the overview of the project, initiatives, the time frame, data collection methods, and the number of participants. So basically, what you did and how you did it. My example here, methods following a brief overview. Students actively engaged in a mock Q study by generating opinion statements known as a concourse about their K through 12 substance abuse education. Then students performed a Q sort and entered data into a web-based program. After reviewing the steps of data analysis, examples of undergraduate honor student Q methodology studies were shared with the group. Content was reinforced as students applied Q methodological principles and techniques to evaluate the class. The project was classified by the University Institutional Review Board as non-human subjects research. Students provided written responses to 4 evaluation questions regarding impressions of the class and the method to populate the concourse. The following week, students sorted their level of agreement with 35 subjective statements on a +4 to -4 grid. Anonymous data were analyzed with PQ method software using centroid factor analysis and Varimax rotation. Now, don't feel bad if you don't understand all of that. That was a mouthful. Again, I'm just trying to use this as an example. So the next section is the results section, and this is where you're going to include your findings. You most likely won't be able to use a graph or visuals in the actual abstract, but you can include them as an attachment, and you definitely will want to utilize them in your poster presentation. You may also want to include the study design in this also. So here's my example. 33 sorts resulted in a 4-factor final solution that explained 45% of the variance. General confusion, n equals 6. Seeing usefulness, n equals 3. Valuing practice, n equals 8. And ambivalence to research, n equals 11. The most favorable attitudes were found among the seeing usefulness group, who perceived that Q methodology was a good way to do patient-centered research and find opinions. Overall, the interactive format and participating in the step-by-step mock study were positive aspects of the class. Perceiving that the session would have been better with prior knowledge and that there was too much to learn in one session represented areas for improvement. So our next section is conclusions or implications, and this section should clearly define the impact of the project and any additional steps that may be needed and recommendations for practice. So my conclusion here is this was the first study to explore outcomes from teaching Q methodology to undergraduate nursing students. The findings reinforce the best teaching and learning practices of exposing students to content prior to class and using active learning strategies. What this study adds to the literature is that teaching undergraduate students about Q methodology can generate interest in alternative approaches for studying subjectivity in nursing practice. More research is needed to understand optimal content exposure. So what I want to tell you now about this is that this study was not planned. I actually asked a guest speaker into my classroom who happened to be an expert on Q methodology, and it was after the classroom event that we decided that we needed to share this information. We submitted an abstract to the Nursing Education Research Conference and was accepted, and then we changed the title and abstract and submitted it to the Sigma Theta Tau International Nursing Research Congress for 2018 and was accepted for a podium presentation there this summer. So the point of this is to inspire and encourage you to consider sharing your innovations and help advancing the nursing profession. So any study, it doesn't have to be anything big. You can do small things, and you can do big things with that. So now that we've discussed the purpose and how to write an abstract, we need to explain how to submit it. The most important detail that I can tell you is do not procrastinate. When you start reviewing the conference details and you realize that you have 1 month or maybe more to submit an abstract by the required due date, don't delay. Take the plunge and get it done. It's easy to put it off and then find yourself scrambling at the last minute to put an abstract together, and then you may even miss the deadline because you don't have an opportunity to get it submitted. So you need to submit early and realize that you'll need time to complete the poster if you're accepted as a presenter. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is adding your work, your presentation to your CV. This is very important, and it's often an oversight that many of us don't realize, or sometimes we just even forget about it as we update our CVs. But it's important to know that you cannot take credit for the same presentation in multiple sections on your CV. This is most important if you happen to be working or applying for any kind of a tenure track position in academia, but you may include all the presentations under one heading on your CV. Or you can also present similar information at several conferences and obtain credit on your CV by simply changing the title in the abstract. So basically, no double dipping. Now at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Becky Feather, and Becky's going to share the next steps of developing a poster. And Becky, please feel free to add anything that I may have forgotten regarding the abstract process.
Thank you, Debbie. No, you did a great job and had a lot of valuable information. I just want to introduce myself here a little bit. My name is Dr. Becky Feather, and I have been a nurse for over 25 years and have actually been in nursing education for around 20 years. I've taught at community colleges and the brick and mortar universities, and now have been with WGU for will be 2 years in June, and have just loved being here. It's been a great opportunity, and I really want to thank the Sigma Theta Tau new chapter with WGU, Psi Upsilon, for inviting us here to do this presentation for you tonight. So I'm going to start sharing my screen with you and pull up my slides. And just to add on to Debbie's presentation, this is going to go right into now your abstract has been submitted, you've been accepted, and you're really excited, and you're ready to move forward. So this will be how to go about developing that poster. So my objectives to help you learn about this tonight will determine the purpose of the poster presentation. I will talk about advantages of having a poster presentation, and we will talk about the content to be included, and then also a really nice principle, the KISS principle. You know, we always think of that as keep it simple, stupid. That's something we've all probably heard of. But this uses some other, it's an acronym for some other ways of putting your poster together, which I thought was a great way to do that. So I wanted to share that with you. So like we all know, posters are sometimes we, like Debbie talked about, we will submit an abstract, and maybe you would submit for both a podium presentation and a poster at a national or local or state conference. And it's okay to go ahead and submit for both of those, like Debbie mentioned, but sometimes you may just be chosen to do the poster versus the presentation. Don't worry about that, because doing posters it's a great way to get your work out there. So it is a really high effective means of communication, because you really get a lot of people to look at your work, and it gives you an opportunity to stand and talk with people and share that work. I said new policies and procedures in the workplace because in a lot of places and organizations, if you work in hospitals and those types of facilities, they may have events where you can actually make posters about new policies and procedures and share those with other nursing staff. Sometimes it's required for a degree. There are some places where you may be required to develop a poster or present at something local. Some universities do have those opportunities for their students, and a lot of times we do have students that work with faculty and present posters at national conferences as well. I know that Sigma Theta Tau has many opportunities for that at their conferences for students, so it's a great door to open for them. We want to talk about how posters are also easy to read format, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on, but it's a great way to present your information in a very concise manner so that people can read it and see it up on a board instead of sometimes having to read through an article. So it's also great to disseminate your research findings like Debbie shared with you. It's an easy to understand format. It's a great way to get your work out there in a quicker fashion than sometimes going through actually just waiting to submit an article. So you can go to seminars, conferences, all kinds of professional meetings and get that work out there quickly. So advantages then are things that are great reasons of why you would want to have a poster presentation. And it does encourage interactions, like I said, between the presenter and the participants at the conference. Also, you can get immediate feedback from people that way, because they will stand there and ask you questions, maybe sometimes things you hadn't really thought about. So it's a great way to get that feedback, get some interaction. And then if you do want to move on and develop an article at some point, sometimes that feedback will be a great source for you when writing up your article. So an example that I wanted to share with you that I did as a poster presenter was at the Midwest Nursing Research Society. And they have something that's very different. They have what's called a poster discussion forum. And I had no idea what this meant when I went, and I had a mentor that encouraged me and said, "Oh, this is great. You'll really love it." And I did. It is a way to work with other people who have submitted abstracts and have been accepted. they will put you in groups with people who have similar topics to yours. And what you do is, instead of having your poster up for like 2 days, and you have certain times where you go and stand at your poster and talk to people, at the MNRS conference, you have like a 2-hour block of time. And so I went into a room and put my poster up, and there were like 5, 6, 7 other people maybe in the room. And you do stand there and talk to people. People come in that are interested, and it's kind of like a podium presentation in a way. Because then after about an hour, those of you that have your posters up will sit like a panel up at the front of the room, and you'll introduce yourselves and your background and talk about your poster a little bit. Then the people in the room, you have a room full of people who can ask questions. So you have a great discussion that comes out of that, and you really interact with the other people who have similar topics and share a lot of information. And it's just a great way to get your work out there and really feel like you're part of something big, and it's very enjoyable. Also, it encourages interactions between staff members, like I talked about before. You may have education days if you are working within a hospital. If you've done work in your school work with a university, you may want to share that in your hospital setting. If we have nurses days or nurses week, it's a great time. I know some of you have probably been at hospitals where you've done that. So poster presentations, that's another way to get information out there. You can reach and inform many people in a short time, because as people walk through and look at your posters, sometimes in the poster present, or the other types of presentations, you may be limited to the amount of people in the room. With a poster, that's not necessarily the case, because all the people through the conference can walk around, look at posters at certain times, and you can really reach a lot of people that way. A poster also allows for scientific findings of your research studies to get out there sooner. When you present for a publication, which is really a great thing to do, and get your word out there in print, your work out there in print, you want to do that. But posters get it out there sooner, so you can share with people, again, get feedback, and maybe utilize that when you're writing your article. Sometimes it takes up to a year or two to actually see your article come out in print. And if you're accepted to present at a conference, that can get your work out there much quicker, and find if there are other people interested as well. It presents your vital research information in an easy to understand format. Again, it puts it on a poster board, and you break it down into maybe bullet points and just very informative, an informative means of getting your work out there quickly and putting it in charts or graphs or whatever you like to do to get it out there. It is cost effective. It's very inexpensive to prepare and print your poster. There are different ways to do it. Sometimes universities offer free printing, but there are places to go that usually you can get for under $100 to have it printed and laminated, make it look really nice. And networking, of course, like I was just saying, it's a great way to network with people who have an interest in your area of research or your topic. And a lot of times I've just received a lot of shared cards with people, exchanged my business cards, and been in contact with them, and I meet them and I see them at other conferences. So it's a great way to network and get to know people in your profession. So here's a slide that has the list of the content of the poster. So first of all, these are things that probably look familiar to you. Of course, you want to have that title. And as Debbie said, that main title, you want it to be interesting, you want it to be concise, and no more than 10 words. You don't want to take up too much space, because you want it to make it big enough that people can see it from a distance. You also want to include, like Debbie said, the author's names, your credentials, and the institution that you're affiliated with. You'll want to have a short introduction, which is kind of an overview, the reason why you did your study. You might want to put a little bit of background on there if you need to. And you can also include any aims or objectives, or those can be put into a separate section if you like to do that. As Debbie talked about in the method section for the abstract, here you're going to put those in there and briefly describe your methodology and any theories that were used. And as you notice, this kind of just goes right along step by step with what your abstracts ask you to do. So once you get that abstract submitted, then you're really going to set your poster up very similar. You'll then have a results section. And this, like we talked about before, could be a text in the form of text. So you could write it out with bullet points. You might want to use graphs or tables and sometimes photographs, or maybe combine those things together. Those, the results kind of go right in the middle of the poster. So it's a great thing, to have those things and make them kind of colorful so they're eye catching. Then you'll want to have a conclusion. This sometimes can be the strongest part of your poster. People may go to that section first. They may want to see, what was the conclusion of your research? What did you learn about it? What came out of it? Here you might want to have your text a little larger. You might want to use bullet points again, or just put an emphasis on the things that were the important things that you learned. Implications, you can have that as part of your conclusion, but those are also important too, because you want to talk about, these were the conclusions, but this is how it's implicated into the field of nursing or education or whatever your aims and goals were. References and acknowledgments. Sometimes there's not enough space for those and if they are, you might put them in a smaller print, but you want to still have your references and acknowledgments, like maybe your funding resources. And you can sometimes do that by just printing those out and having those there on the table beside you. And that way you're still giving credit to those articles and references and people who funded you, but you don't have to put it right on the poster. So what makes a great poster? Again, you want it to attract attention and you want it to communicate the purpose of why you did your poster. What's the reasoning behind it? And you want to make sure that it's concise and then allows people to get your message. And they want to be able to get that message quickly in 3 to 5 minutes. You shouldn't want them to stand up there for a long time and have to read the whole thing before they're really able to understand it. And they should be able to get your message without having to even ask you a lot of questions. It should be there on your poster and be obvious. So again, you don't want your poster to be too wordy, because then your text gets really small and people are doing more reading really than getting the benefit of it. So the visual communication is important. You don't want to clutter it. You want things to be evenly spaced. You want it to look nice and neat. If you do use graphics, don't make them too distracting. Don't use too many colors and draw all the attention away from other sections. And make sure that it's used, that you use only that it supports your conclusion. So make sure those graphics are not pulling away from those conclusions. And another thing, make sure that you follow the instructions for the production size. Like Debbie mentioned earlier with the abstract, you will have a certain size of poster, and sometimes people forget to do that. So as soon as you learn that you've been accepted, you want to look those instructions up. What's the size of my poster? What's it supposed to look like? Is it a 4x4? Is it a square? Is it a rectangle? So you want to make sure you know what those are, because it can be really awkward when you get there to display your poster if you haven't paid attention to that and your poster is not fitting on your display board, too big, too small compared to everyone else. So make sure you pay attention to that. So here is the KISS principle I referred to earlier, and you'll see that all the C's there. It looks like a C in a circle up there. That's because the C's are the things you want to pay attention to, and those are in green. So this was pretty interesting, and I think it really kind of speaks to what you want to make sure you have in your poster. You want to make sure it's creative, but you want to make sure it's clear and catchy. Again, you want it to be concise. Bullets are better. You can put more in bullet points than writing things out at times. Again, less is more. Don't overload with sentence structure. And put the most important parts at the eye level at the center of the poster. Those usually are your results, but you want to draw people because that's what they're going to look at first. So put those parts there and make sure that they're easy to see. If you're going to use charts, pictures, graphs, and tables, those are better than a lot of narrative. Again, keep your diagrams and things simple. And you want things to be easily read at 2 to 4 feet away. You don't want to have where people have to come right up and stand right in front of the poster to read it. You want them to be able to stand back so that a lot of people can kind of stand there together and see it. And then the color contrast and things that catch the eye. Be really careful that you don't overload with colors. Make sure they complement each other. And some colors included are light gray or black or color combinations. And if you're going to use white print on a dark background, that's also attractive. But remember, that's not always as easy to read. It may look good when you're putting it on the computer, when you're setting up your poster, and then you'll go to print it out and it won't look like at all like what you think it might. So kind of be very careful about that, and don't try to get too trendy or use things that are not normally utilized in the way we put print on paper. So again, if you're going to use white paper, you might want to create a border that goes around the poster so that it's colorful and it's easy to see, and it kind of, highlights that poster. Calligraphy, typefaces, Arial or Times New Roman, those are things that look good. Don't mix up your fonts and put multiple fonts. That looks really messy. And it distracts from the point of your poster, and it makes it hard for people to read. So font sizes, you want 80 to 72 for your title. And again, that's going to depend on how many words are in your title. And then you may want to go from 50 to 48 for your names and credentials. Those are going to be a little bit smaller. And then at least 32 for the body. The font in your acknowledgments, again, and references can go smaller than that, because if you do have room, you don't really need to take up a lot of space with that. And again, you can use a separate handout on the table that people can look at for your references. Be consistent throughout it. Be careful. Read and reread. It is so easy to make mistakes and to have typos, and that can be really embarrassing once you print it out and it's up there big and bold in a poster. So have other people look at it for you. Have them read it, because you know how it is with papers. You get very used to looking at things and very familiar, and you won't catch things. So make sure you have people read that for you. So these are little practical tips. You can use a PowerPoint slide to create your poster. When you print it, you'll want to make sure you select current slide, and you'll want to scale it to fit the paper. So again, you need to know what are the specifications that the conference is asking for, and make sure you scale to those specifications. You can change your poster size under that page setup. And our typical sizes we see are like 56 wide and 36 high. But like I said, some places I've seen them 4x4, which would be 48 by 48. But again, it depends on the organization or the conference. The title should be readable from like 20 feet away. You want it to be big enough that people don't have to walk all the way up to see it, that they can kind of be standing back. And again, your text needs to be readable from a distance as well. Don't overuse the color. We have poster templates at WGU. We have other places may have that. So wherever you are or wherever you work, see if they have templates available for you, because that's very helpful. If they have logos, the colors that they want you to use, and those kinds of things, it's great if that's available and you don't have to try to figure that out on your own, because doing specific colors is hard to do. Make sure you have the right equipment. So this is something sometimes people don't think about. Take those push pins, or however you're going to hang your poster. A lot of places will have those there, and most typically they do, but sometimes they don't, or someone else may come over and take yours because they didn't bring anything or they don't have enough. So you want to make sure you take things to hang it, just in case, that you have a way to transport it in like a poster tube, the cardboard tubes, so that you can protect it. A lot of times we're flying, you're doing it as a carry-on. You don't want it to be all bent up and ruined before you ever get there. So these are a few references for you. And this is our contact information. So before going on to questions, and this is our sincere appreciation of people, I will let
Hi, thank you,
Carol
Becky.
talk about here.
Oh, thank you so much. I did want, before we, as you're starting to think about questions, if you want to enter questions into the Q&A, I wanted to just express, first of all, my sincere appreciation to Debbie and Becky for this wonderful presentation. But I also would like to recognize Jeanette Benson, who is the chair of our program committee, and Tracy Starkey, who serves on the committee that helped facilitate find not only program ideas, but program presenters for this and upcoming programs. Dr. Janine Barrett, who's our technology chair, and she's facilitating our Blue Jeans presentation this evening. And Melissa McLaren, who's our publicity committee chair, who's really helped facilitate announcing our upcoming events and allowing us to share the new logo colors of Sigma. I also would like to encourage you to look at the chapter website for upcoming events that I'll talk about when we're finished with Q&A, and remind you that we've got some great high-powered and internationally renowned nursing speakers that will be presenting for us in the upcoming months. So before we wrap things up, does anybody have any questions that you'd like to add into the Q&A and for Debbie and Becky to respond? I don't see any, but I do have a few things I just wanted to share and ask a few questions. First of all, Becky, I loved you and Deb and your practical tips and about bringing the push pins. But I have another one: wear comfortable shoes, because sometimes you forget that you're standing at that poster for a long time. And it's really important for you to be comfortable so when the viewers are walking by and presenting that you have an opportunity to feel comfortable yourself and pardon the pun, put your best foot forward. I also wanted to mention that when we're talking about posters and abstracts, it isn't always just about primary research anymore. I know Debbie mentioned a little bit about this was kind of a serendipitous research study that you conducted, and Becky, you talked about it in the posters, but aren't we seeing more and more of posters about evidence-based practice projects and also clinical practice tools, whether it's guidelines or documents or processes, and what have you been seeing in your travels with all the different conferences?
Yes, we do see lots of about education as well as research, and I think Debbie hit on that a little bit. And then as well, when I talked about the organizations, you may see things coming out about evidence-based practice and what's going on through the practice of nursing and patient outcomes. So it is not just necessarily that it's all research. There are lots of opportunities out there for different topics and different means of getting information out to nurses and educators.
I agree. And also, one of the big things right now, and I've been very fortunate to be involved in some of it, is interprofessional development practice. So, and simulations, those are really big hot topics right now in academia that we're seeing a lot of.
Excellent point. And that sharing of best practices, and of course we're educators about instructional strategies, and again, just sometimes things that we're learning by trying new things. And what was the outcome? It's that wonderful robust knowledge sharing that we're seeing. And those are perfect topics for posters as well, because people will stand and chat and ask questions, and there's a lot of give and take in
Right.
the posters. I've always enjoyed that. So do we have any questions from anybody for this evening? If not, please remember that this program has been recorded, and Debbie and Becky's contact information and the recording will be posted on the Psi Upsilon website. And when you are starting to look at developing an abstract, please feel free to reach out to us through the website, to Debbie or Becky, or to any of us as we're helping you move forward in your professional growth and building your professional portfolio. A few reminders on upcoming activities. We do have Dr. Carol Houston is going to be speaking to us in June. We also, at the end of July, will be offering our 4th annual research symposium. And Dr. Benson will be sending out the information about that symposium. It's going to be held in a virtual setting, and we will be identifying the platform to do that. So there won't be any limit to the numbers of people that we can list asynchronously. I also want to remind you that we're working with Dr. Gwen Sherwood and Dr. Mustafa Badek, who is one of the key nursing leaders out of Saudi Arabia, to talk to us about topics with their international work. And finally, just thanking you for joining us this evening. There's just so much going on, and it's because of all of you that our chapter and our university is exceptionally successful. And again, please reach out to us if you have any questions. I want to finalize by again thanking Debbie and Becky for this wonderful presentation. And if any of you have any questions and you want to see samples of posters, we're going to have all of this available to you on our website. So with that, we'll be concluding our program this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.